Today I thought I would take you through some of the photographs that I've been taking in the last few videos, so the last 2 or 3 weeks. And I thought it might be useful to show some of the thought processes involved at capture time and then through development and then finally to the final image. And you know, because it's nice to see how things turn out, I guess, at the end of the day, at least for me anyway. So this particular shot was one of the early morning shots that I took when it was overcast, I think 2 or 3 videos ago, in the grasslands of South Africa. And this particular image is of a pair of Waterbuck, which are sort of eyeing me suspiciously because they want to cross the road that I'm on at the moment. So they're having a look at me across the grasses, and it's quite a heavy crop into this photograph. And I've been taking a lot of pictures with a 16:9 crop ratio in mind. Perhaps that's because I'm shooting a lot of video at the moment, but I actually genuinely like that 16:9, that wider field of view and that sort of narrow crop in my wildlife photographs at the moment. So I've been deliberately seeking out situations where I can emphasize or utilize the condition of capture or the image that I see for a 16:9, and this was one of those images. And the reason I feel it works very nicely for a 16:9 is because the two animals are captured at either side of the frame, and it lets me extend that view. And I like it even more because the second animal, the one on the right, is actually not in focus. It's further back in the image and not in the focal plane. So your eye is immediately drawn to the Waterbuck on the left, the female Waterbuck on the left, and then it travels across to the Waterbuck on the right. So it's using that breadth in the frame. And having been shot at f2.8 with a 400 2.8, it's obviously got a very dreamy feel with that very shallow depth of field in this sort of misty morning type of shot. So it's okay. This image is okay. I quite like it. But I have 2 significant problems. The biggest problem I have is the horizon line. And I see this a lot with wildlife shots. The horizon line, quite often, because of the height of the vehicle and the height of the animal, actually intersects or bisects the animal's head. I don't like that in a picture. It feels distracting to me. So I'm not keen on that aspect of this, which is why I often try to shoot my subjects against a slope, so that slope extends back beyond their head and you don't actually see the horizon. Now this was a gentle slope, but it wasn't slopey enough, or I wasn't high enough to place these Waterbuck with their heads below the horizon. So that's an annoyance. The second thing are these acidic pink pom-pom weeds. There's not enough to be a whole field here, and there's just a few distracting ones. And they're an invasive weed in South Africa. They're not natural, or they don't belong in this grassland. So this picture is immediately jarring to anyone who actually understands what should be in the picture from an African's perspective. And as a nature photographer, that is reasonably important. You want to portray nature as it is, and I guess it is like this, but as it should be, let's say, in a proper wild environment, rather than this sort of environment that used to be a farm and has environmental damage to the grasslands. So how do we get rid of that? Now obviously I could clone it out. I could clone these weeds out, and I could also potentially move these Waterbuck down and maybe move the horizon up with content-aware fills and all that kind of stuff. But that's a lot of work, and it's also not really how the shot was taken. It then becomes something else, which is fine, but I don't really want to spend that much time on this image. So I think the easiest thing to do in this case is simply to convert it to black and white. And the reason that's going to help, particularly with the sky, is because the brightness of this misty section of sky and this pale green grass is actually almost the same. It's almost the same luminosity. So when we convert that to black and white, you won't see the color change, you'll just see the brightness change. And because the brightness is almost the same, it's not going to be there anymore. Now the second thing it's going to do, quite obviously, is remove this acidic pink from the photograph and replace it with just a darker form or structure of a plant, which is a lot more, which is a lot easier to accept in a natural environment if you're looking at it than perhaps a shocking pink that just is jarring and lends this picture a note that really shouldn't be there in this sort of minimalist, shallow depth of field scene. So I did convert it to black and white, and I'm hoping you can see now that that horizon line is far less pronounced, much less pronounced, and less distracting from the heads of these two Waterbuck. And the other thing is, when you convert to black and white, quite often it's possible to use a filter. So in the world of film, you'd use a filter on black and white, something like a red or a green or a yellow filter, a standard yellow filter, because it emphasizes the contrast in the image, what it does. So if I put a green filter on this image here, it would emphasize it would brighten the grasses because the grasses are green, so it would pass through that filter more easily and it would be brighter. In this case, I used a yellow filter, I think, and what it's done, it's made these grasses quite bright because there's also a little bit of yellow in them. It's tonally matched that sky quite nicely. I've just got a thin, darkish line there to suggest a horizon, which is a lot less detracting or distracting than it was before. At the same time, I've got a nice contrast appearing in these two Waterbuck. So I think for me, the black and white conversion is far more effective in terms of what I had in mind for the shot after I took it. I knew that I was going to have a personal problem with that horizon line, and I felt that black and white would solve that. And I find that that's true in a lot of situations when we photograph wildlife, where there's a change in vegetation with height or something detracting in terms of color. You can eliminate it by simply converting to black and white.